Okay, guys. Hi, everybody. How's it going? Today we are going to talk about the book Scale. Hey, my faithful Saxon, he's always with us. I don't think you want to see all these Italian things. But anyway, let's focus on the slides. I hope everybody's enjoying the 60,000 price. We can talk that on tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll do a live about the price and where we are going. But I kind of told you about what was going to happen, that the price was going to oscillate. But this is above a book scale, so let's focus on that for now. And if you want a market update, we can do that tomorrow. Apologies if there is some problem with the quality of the video. I have not internet since yesterday, so I'm using my phone as a hotspot. Hopefully it doesn't die, but let's try this. So we left the last time with page 81. This is page 81 in my Kindle. Let me try to do this a little bit bigger so maybe you can see better. Slideshow from current slide. Okay, and at a certain point I will get out of a slide presentation and check your questions if you have questions. And please feel free to ask questions at any time. I will check them regularly and answer. You can, but it's supposed to be a book club where you ask questions. Maybe it will be more interactive in the future. I don't know how we can do that, but it should be a back and forth, right? And I suggest you to buy the book if you have a chance and read it together. We're going relatively slow. It's good because I want to go in the book in depth, so you can catch up. We're still at page 81. So basically, last time we were talking about how as a physicist we are trained to see signs and not just the physical object, because many people that are not in physicists think that we have some kind of boundary, like, oh, this is your boundary, this is physics, you cannot go beyond, right? There was some Adrian guy that even wrote an article all based on basically telling me to stay in my lane because Bitcoin is not physics, and he's completely wrong, and he says a lot of silly things, but it's not such a limit because everything is made of physics. Everything is in the physical world, so we can study. The question is how much we can stand with the tools of physics to things like biology or even society. And when you actually do it and you try, it works. It really works because you can explain, in fact, things that people that have spent their entire life, like a biologist, neuroscientist, they don't ever address it. It's not that there is no space for them, because sometimes maybe you need people that are more about qualitative description, and maybe they can see things in a different angle, and maybe they still contribute. We don't have to be all physicists, and we don't have to do all a mathematical or quantitative approach. There is space also for other approaches. It still need to be a scientific method, but it doesn't have to be always quantifiable. But when you try to quantify, when you're trying to assign quantities to the things that you observe, going from biology, but also human phenomena, you go through breakthrough that you would not be able to do if you were doing it without this approach. Now, maybe one day, everything we do will be numbers, will be just described by numbers. So it's not necessarily numbers, because people think numbers means 1, 2, 3, 4, like these. Again, that is something that is from being unfamiliar with what math means. Math is also about patterns. It's about a certain logical way of thinking about the world. It's about structure, and so it's not necessarily math as people think it is, with a proof, right? It can be statistics, it can be probabilistic, it could be about general trends, not like for example, when physicists started to study complex system, in particular when they went to things like biology, they gave up a little bit about this very mechanistic understanding of the universe. Like if it was everything is like a clock with mechanical parts, we realize it's much more complex than that. And then we developed the language and we developed the tools where we could still describe what was going on, but in a much more fuzzy way, let's say, but still very formal and with very precise way of saying what happens in certain conditions and so on. So maybe this approach will work for almost everything we do, little by little. If, for example, right now, even with neural networks, when you talk to ChatGPT and he responds to you or even make a poem, it's all math. It's all math, right? It's all these network weights in the artificial intelligence, and also it's all math here, because it's very similar. This is why they're called neural network, because they're trying to reproduce not a one-to-one correspondence, but they are trying to reproduce how the brain works. So maybe one day everything will be just a bunch of math. The universe is a bunch of math. But that it's a separate discussion. Maybe we can go there more in depth at a certain point. But the next section, it talks about his transition, right? Because what happened, it's very interesting. So beside the book be so interesting and cover so many topics, it's also very interesting from, let's say, life experience point of view, because Jeffrey went through a process kind of similar to mine, where in my career, I tried many different things. Many professionals stay in one particular field basically all their lives, and they don't try many different fields. And it can be very frustrating, and also sometimes you wonder if you go, maybe I was not the most efficient, because I could have been like very famous in my field, or I could have accomplished much more if I stayed just in one particular area. Other times, it's actually the most amazing thing. Like even personally, I have similar. Like he's, of course, he has much a higher role than I have in the scientific world, but it doesn't matter, right? But it's kind of a similar idea where he went through many type of fields, and he studied them, bringing this understanding from physics. And when he did that, it makes me laugh sometimes when I hear some of his interview. I read the book, he talks about this. I found exactly the same patterns, and I will tell you what they are in doing this kind of life experience, in going from one field to another. Um, and he talks about a lot about how powerful physics is, because one of the things that happened is that almost immediately you make a breakthrough, even if you are a newcomer, even if you don't know the field very well. So, on one end, it's very frustrating, and he did it under pressure. It was not his first choice. And the same thing happened with me. I had some life decisions or certain things. Like, for example, one was the financial crisis of 2008, where I lost my teaching job in a small college, and I was also doing research over there. So I wanted to find this as an opportunity to do something new, instead of just looking at it in a negative fashion. And so I threw myself in the field of neuroscience. It was like very interesting for me. And then now, I'm doing mostly finance, physics of finance. I'm sorry, I'm drinking some water. So, um, yeah, and I see a lot of parallels with this experience. And this experience started in 1993, where he was working in this field of particle physics, and there was a lot of expectation for this project. And I remember because I was starting my my graduate studies at that time. Uh, I was in the middle of my graduate studies, and uh, it was very sad because it could have brought um, a lot of breakthroughs in the field of particle physics. And some people don't have a vision because they think, oh, this thing is so. You're talking about stuff that is so far away from common experience and what is important to people. But it's not true, because by working in abstract things like that, it's not abstract because it's still experiments. They develop a lot of technology that they are pushing the technology to a limit that you will not need to push it by doing other things. And it's like having humanity is almost like, humanity is always like that. It's the same idea when we go to space. I say, why we go to space? Because why don't we do things on Earth? Because it's like challenging. When you challenge yourself and you push the limit of humanity, then you have all these discoveries, all these applications, but then they can be applied to Earth. Like a lot of things that we use right now on Earth that we do, like Velcro, but that is just a silly example. There are many new materials, all kinds of different things, fuels, electronics. They were developed during the exploration of space, right, during the 60s, because people were pushing technology to places where you would not need to push it if you were doing just things on Earth. Same thing with this very, these kind of cutting edge experiments where you will think what that has to do with the common person, everything, because you're pushing humanity to limits and we are trying to understand the universe, and you never know what will be the next things that will change humanity forever, what will bring incredible wealth or new applications. Physicists have invented the CAT machine. They invented the MRI scanner. And again, many times because they developed technology in these very advanced experiments that don't necessarily have a practical application. So, and the other thing people don't realize when people ask. Sorry for the rant, but it's interesting, and I want to talk about that for a few seconds, a few minutes. People think that the budget for NASA is like, oh, I saw some uh, questionnaires like that, some polls, and people were asked, how much do you think the NASA budget is? And people would say, 20% of the U.S. GDP. It's ridiculous. It's like they don't realize that it is the military, other things like that. It's not NASA or the other science project. Usually are like a small little percentage. You can find the projects like this with few tanks, or few, like a submarine or something. Even the most expensive scientific project, this was probably one of the most expensive. We already spent 3 billion on it, right? Not necessarily a tank. Okay, I don't know, like, what is a tank? $10 million or several tanks, but still, like we destroy these tanks. They rot after some time anyway, or airplanes. It's not huge. 3 billions for the United States is nothing, and I don't know. That was the initial cost, but maybe it was total 20 billion, so something. Well, that would be nothing in comparison with so many things. So, but whatever, they decided to shut it down. Mostly was a political thing, because maybe it was a financial crisis during that time. Um, there were some politics issue because we were building in Texas and whatever. He's just trying to explain um, what were the problem. I was part of one of these very large projects that is LIGO. In fact, LIGO it's a detector of gravitational waves that eventually the project and the people involved in the project got the Nobel Prize a few years ago. and is one of the most incredible discoveries ever that we did in the history of mankind. And that project was, had 100 of physicists involved all over the world, and it was close to several $100 million or $1 billion. But the payoff from that science will be incredible. It's a way of changing mankind forever. But that one actually was funded, but this one was closed down. Anyway, also he's trying to say there was some kind of sentiment in the public, but also among politicians, where biology was becoming, at that time, now you will say that machine learning and neural networks, that is the most popular field, right? There is so much more invested in that. Not much from the government, right? It's mostly from private companies, but in terms of the government interest, at the end of the going from the 1900s to the 2000, there was this interest, very strong interest in biology, right? All this biotech, manipulation of the DNA, genetics. It is still there, right? There is a strong interest. Now we are shifting a little bit more towards AI, because if you solve AI and then we have very clever machines, then we start to solve everything else, because we start, and now we are doing a lot of progress in understanding proteins, and physics is more complicated, but because I think actually one of the reasons why we didn't do very much progress in fundamental physics, because that is another subject that we could explore sometime, but it's almost like physics got stuck. Now, there are still a lot of progress, right? But it's mostly like very precise, particular application of physics to this field, to this other field, material science, or astrophysics, because we still make observation. But if you're talking about foundational physics, and this experiment was the experimental component for foundational physics, because that is part, in fact, one of the problems, that we have all these theories, and then we don't have ways of testing. And if for physics it's fundamental, you cannot. It's a problem if you just have a theory and then you cannot test it with real experiments. Now, some of the things that some of this theory cover, even the huge big colliders like these, this was a huge big particle collider, right? With one that we were trying to build in Texas, much bigger than the one we have in CERN, for example, in Europe. That is now one of the leader colliders in the world. But to test some of the most fundamental part of nature that physicists are still exploring, at least theoretically, we will need colliders that are as big as the galaxy or something like that, or much more clever experiments where we come up with something that we never thought about. Because right now we are really kind of like monkeys in trying to understand the world, right? This world of particle physics, we smash particle in this. It's like taking a watch. You want to know what is inside the watch. You say, "Oh, watch," and you're a monkey, and you're throwing it against the wall, and the watch get all destroyed, and that from the flying pieces you're trying to understand what was inside the watch. This is what we are doing. So maybe that is a very primitive way of doing it, and maybe AI will show us a much more clever way that we didn't think about. That is really exciting. But at least for Jeffrey, this was an opportunity to actually change his field and started to explore these other fields of science, because he realized, right, say, kind of like what happened with me, like he realized, okay, there is all this interest in biology, maybe I should pick up some biology. uh, he's talking about this sentence that was kind of almost like a slogan beside this. They were saying, 19th century was the century of physics, all this discovery, quantum mechanics, general relativity, the atomic bomb, but physics was the hottest science, right? And then we switched to biology, and now since actually 20 years after the beginning of the 21st century, AI is a hot science, right? You actually know, yesterday they gave a Nobel Prize for physics for AI application, for a neural network application. That is really interesting, really cool. And so, it started to change, going in that direction where he wanted to understand a little bit of biology, and he wanted to see if actually, as a physicist, he could contribute to this biological field. And like I was explaining before, that is kind of my motivation when I went to study neuroscience, because I thought, actually I will be kind of a cool kid in the class, because I bet if I go in that field, many people will not have my skills in computation, in programming, in mathematics, physics. So I will have an advantage, and it will be cool because I can make contributions that other have not made. And I was right, because first of all, for a physicist, it's nothing to pick up this stuff. It's not that I want to brag about physics, because I have studied physics, but it's really like a very, very, it's almost like I say all the time, it's the special forces of science. Like you go in the military and everybody can be a soldier, then very few people became the SEAL. Physicists are like the SEAL. Even just in terms of self-selection, many people want to study physics in the first place. You have to have a very strong motivation. You have to be very focused, and you have to have skills. You have to have a kind of focus, concentration. Like when I was a graduate student, this is what you did from morning to evening, just studying physics. It's like, it's very exhaustive. You go to sleep and you're thinking about physics. Before I took my general exam, right, you have 5 days where you are tested with all the equations, everything you learned since you were an undergraduate. I covered. My wife at the time, I had a wife and a little kid. They were in Estonia, and they were not there. And our little apartment was full of equations everywhere, even in the bathroom, because I was studying this equation and studying for this. I seemed like, if you think I'm crazy, like you had to look to see my apartment at that time. You see, that movie, The Beautiful Mind. It was like that. It was covered with all the equations everywhere, and I was trying to memorize them and memorizing the problem and trying to understand the problem of how to solve it. Because the exam is almost like the Olympic game. It's not just about understanding. You have to do it so quickly that the only way is kind of memorizing the problem. You have to understand it, of course, but you have to know how to do it so fast that has to be like second nature, right? Okay, this problem, this is what it is about, and I know how to solve it. And it's crazy. But so it's very easy for us to pick up any other topic. Like if you read a book of physics, is an equation, and then they say, and as it's very easy to show, and then we have another equation. And you say, where the heck this equation came from, right? Because supposedly it's the solution of the equation we just show above. And if you actually sit down and you take a piece of paper and you write the equation, because this is how you study physics, you have a book on one side and a notebook on the other, where you write every time they say, and it's very easy to show that when you say, okay, let me see if it is easy. And after 3 pages, oh, okay, it was kind of easy. And 3 pages of calculation to show that actually the next step follow. If you are studying neuroscience or biology, it's like reading a novel. It's really easy. Okay, there are ideas and concept and terminology to pick up, but it doesn't require all that focus that you need to study physics. It's really amazing. Everybody should take a physics class in their life, at least introductory physics class. But anyway, for us as a physicist, when we study this field, say, where are the equations? Where I don't see any equations. How do they know anything if they don't have equations, if they don't have relationship, quantitative relationship between things? Uh, you know, that is our angle, our perspective. And so this is what he said, that as he was starting to study this field of biology, because he realized maybe being a hot science, I need to pick up some biology. Maybe I need to do some contributions. We're closing down the accelerator. Maybe I need to find another job. This is what is how that impacted his life, and this how he started to transition to these less quantified fields. But it's important because, and that also because remember we studied this book, but for the people that listen, but if they don't know, we are coming from the angle of making connections with Bitcoin, right? And so it's the same thing with Bitcoin, where as a physicist, I want to understand Bitcoin as a mathematical system where I want to see a relationship between quantity, I want to see pattern, I want to see statistical calculation. I don't care about all these TA analyses, that are very much like hand waving. They seem like they have to do with mathematics, like, okay, there is this moving average, etc. But it's not that. It's more qualitative and quantitative. So this is very natural for us to want to have this particular angle to say, hey, can we calculate? Can we compute? Like sometimes there are many situations where you cannot write an equation, but at least I want to write some kind of algorithm and then make a simulation, right? Maybe I can simulate it through certain interactions, some certain simplification, say, okay, there are these things that are interacting with each other, and maybe they look like cells, it's a very, we call it toy models. But then I can calculate, because a lot of times these little simple toy models, you will be surprised how incredibly they can reproduce something very complex, like biology or even human beings. Like you make a little toy model of have you ever seen this thing called cellular automata? Uh, it's like you have a little rules on a square and say, oh, if this square becomes black and two neighbors are white, then make this thing happen or whatever, right? And you can make all kind of rules, and by exploring different rules and different way that these systems can change, you can create even something that looks like life. In fact, there is this famous thing called the game of life. But it's all calculations, all computations. So this is the way that mathematicians, in particular physicists, will look at this situation. Um, and he's saying, he continues and he says, there is some traditions of physicists having left, not left completely, but left mentally the field of pure uh, physical realms, like stones falling down, planets moving in the sky, and they started to explore the field of life and biology. In particular, he mentions Crick and Watson, that were basically physicists, because at that time they wanted to understand the DNA, and so they were using X-rays. They were making pictures. I don't know if you ever have a chance, read a book about how the DNA was discovered, because it's really cool. It's almost like a detective story, how they figured it out. That it was a double helix, etc. It's really, really cool. If you ever time. Our days, maybe many people don't read book, but I'm sure there is a audiobook version if you like, to listen to audiobook when you go to the car, etc., and you travel. And the physicists came in, and they had all this understanding of how an X-ray works. Like they use X-rays to explore things like crystals, because by the interference of the X-rays pattern, you see this interference pattern, when you can reconstruct the shape. Today is much easier because we have computers, all kind of stuff, but at the time was more complicated. And so, basically the DNA was discovered by physicists. And now I think it was Crick. And Crick, in fact, went to neuroscience eventually. Uh, so he went from physics to biology to neuroscience. Neuroscience is a branch of biology, but a specific one. And he was actually interested in the field of consciousness. That is really cool. So in fact, a lot of physicists are very much interested in this ultimate question of all. What is consciousness? Because that is even a step further in biology. Because we everything we give us meaning in our life is about being conscious, right? And then actually there is this famous book, because this came out relatively early in 1944, from this scientist that everybody knows, right? At least Schrödinger cat. He was a kind of one of the founding father of quantum mechanics, and he wrote this beautiful book called What is Life? So if you ever have a chance, this is a very nice book to read too. Very high level questions, almost philosophical questions, but it's a really interesting book. So and I know the feeling, because uh, as a physicist, many times you're asking yourself, should I? Why am I here? What am I doing in this field? Why I'm also, because the problems are so much more difficult and complicated. Like, it's not that physics is easy, but at least you can do measurement more easily. You can hope that there is some kind of physics equation that describe what you're exploring, but it's not easy with biology. It's much more complicated. Um, and so that is here it says, because these are among the most ubiquitous and fundamental characteristic of life, because I was asking about growth, uh, and also the subject of death. So if it, what is life, right? Even fundamental, like for example, question like that. What is life, right? Because many biologists try to avoid to answer this question at all. They will tell you, okay, I think this thing is alive, right? It's an animal, and then they tend to create categories. Okay, there are different families, and then tell you about the physiology, but we don't go to the core of the core of the core, right? How do we distinguish life from non-life, or how, if it's a process, how did we go from a world where maybe an earth where there was no life to actually creating life? These are, for a physicist, these are natural questions, but many biology don't even want to go there. I'm generalizing. Of course, there are some of them that do, um, but then there are things that are surprising, because like he was interested in particular about aging. And by the way, I'm interested in this field myself, very, very much so, but I have a completely different angle from him, and you will see what is. I don't like aging. I don't want it. I want to defeat it. But I know that many of you will criticize me or have a different opinion of it. But that is where I am in my life. That I think it's a problem that humanity can solve, and once we have it behind it, we will think why people even thought it was okay to die in the past. We will look at this like they were crazy. But let's discuss that in a moment. But what is interesting, when he was talking about this, I noticed the same thing. When I went to neuroscience, I will ask a question to my colleagues, and most of them were actually, I was working in the School of Medicine at Northwestern University, and in particular I was in the neurology department. Um, so I went, from this small teaching school where I barely could do research, because most of the time I had to teach. I was trying still to do pretty good research, in my free time, my weekends, over the summer, and then I did basically just mostly research. I was helping some grad students. A couple of grad students actually took the topic that I kind of almost invented, with this idea of stimulating the brain during sleep to improve your memory, and they made a dissertation, a PhD dissertation out of that. So I was supervising the students, but as when I pick up the field pretty quickly. Of course, this medical doctor knew much more about the physiology of the brain. I will go to them to ask questions about that, right? So they spend so much more time. They could teach me about these things, the physiology, of the anatomy, all these things. But they're relatively simple to pick up, right? You can spend a few days, a few weeks, and you learn about the brain anatomy or everything you need to know. When then you specialize in a particular point, I think you became an expert in that particular field. Like right now, I can tell you everything about what is called slow wave sleep, and probably I know more about slow wave sleep than your doctor, you're a normal doctor, because they don't specialize in that particular field. But then I will go to them and ask questions like, okay, there are these waves that we are trying to study and understand. What is the distribution of the size of these waves, of the amplitude of the wave? Which is it a bell curve? Does it have any other type of shape? And then we had no clue. And you will think, okay, I'm sure there is a paper that published this result, in all the neuroscience journal. So you go and look at the literature, you research it everywhere. And there was not one single paper that answered this very simple question that, as a physicist, is one of the first things you want to know. You want to know, like, imagine you're studying the population of penguin, and you want to know what is their weight. What is the average weight, how they are distributed, maybe during winter they do different things, in summer. You ask some questions like that. You want to quantify, and you want to know, is it a normal distribution? Does it look like a bell curve? Do you have like a tail? Because if it has a tail, it's very interesting. It becomes like one of these complex systems. And in fact, guess what? It had a tail. In fact, it's associated with the power law, with complexity. I was finding power law kind of systems in neuroscience all the time, and we had no clue about that things. Very, very similar to what is happening with the Bitcoin community, because unless you're seeing with the right angle and with the right approach, people are not familiar about these kind of things. And it was surprising for me to say, like, you guys are supposed to be the expert. Neuroscience is a pretty established field, and nobody. It was weird, right? I was the first one finding out that this particular phenomena behaved in this way. It's like, right? So weird. It's the same thing with Bitcoin. There are a lot of analogy in what I learned when I came into the field of neuroscience with what happened when I started to study Bitcoin, because people didn't look at things with the physicist eye. And it gives you like, almost like you have a magic power. You have like a superpowers. It's unbelievable. And he had the same thing. Like, this is why, he was able to write an entire book about this. But in this particular case, he's talking about how the field of aging was not very developed. And that is true, because even when I was there, aging actually was a very interesting question for us, because this part of sleep that I was studying is affected by aging. And as you age, it's almost like you can use it as a biomarker for aging. So we produce these slow waves that are associated with all the good things that happen during slow wave sleep, like you are producing hormones, like in particular with men, you're producing testosterone. And there is this process of memory consolidation where you, like right now, you're listening to me, and then tonight, you will start to think about these things, and you will make long-term memories out of this knowledge that you're learning from this video. And that happens during slow wave sleep. And it happens, we don't know why, because that is one of the things that happen with biology. It's so complicated that sometimes we do see relationship, but then we don't understand the mechanism, um, because it's so complicated. So it takes time to go deeper and deeper and deeper. And but we know there is a very interesting relationship between the size of these slow waves and how well you go through this process of memory consolidation, how well you will um, make these long-term memories. And so remember the material that you are listening right now. Uh, and, um, and so, um, aging was important to us. We started to understand the effect of aging. Some other laboratories try to figure out how much of a decay there is through aging. But in general, it's still a field where not many people are working. It's becoming better, and more people are addressing it. But yeah, it's you will think that is a kind of a fundamental questions, but it's not. And he's discussing that, right? That there were all these fundamental questions that to him seemed too natural to ask, but he couldn't find the answer anywhere. Like, for example, um, he was asking why there are typical scales, and this is why this word is so important. This word scale in the entire book is kind of started to creep in. It's not that scale was not something important in his research before, because in physics scale is everywhere. In fact, this is why he's asked that question, because you will ask that question as a physicist. Why that particular time frame of 100 years, right? More or less. Some people live less, some people more, but close to 100 years. And that is another physicist thing. Like, we like to round things to the scale. So if you have something like 8 years, you always round it to the closest uh, full 10, powers of 10 number, right? So if you have 20, that number to us is 10 when we think in scale, right? All the time we are very, very precise to many decimal places. But when we go to this mode, the scale mode, like, oh, I'm going to understand this phenomena from a scale point of view, you always want to round to the closest 10. So if it is 20, it's going to be 10. If it is 50, you're going to round it to 100, right? If it is 80, it's 100. If it is 800, becomes 1,000, right? So you always round it to the closest multiple of 10, because this multiple of 10 represent the scale, right? And so why this typical scale of 100 years for human beings? Where does it come from? Is it something fundamental? And what are the reasons? What can then maybe look at the other animals? Why the cat lives 10 years? Why the horse lives, I don't know if the horse lives 20 years, but I imagine so, right? Or maybe why the elephant lives very, very long lives, or whatever, right? How life scales among all the different animals? Is there an answer? And he couldn't find, right? There was no theory to understand how age goes with the size of the animal, maybe with its metabolism, at least when he started to enter in the field. I'm sure because of him and other scientists like him, we did much more progress. But at the time when he entered the field, there was not much understanding. Now, I follow a lot this field of aging, and actually everything that people are doing to try to defeat aging, because that is my angle. I want to understand if there is a way that science can overcome aging, maybe even reverse aging. He comes from a different point of view. So I don't want to insist in my perspective. It's a very important part of my own identity, that I'm very strong against aging, and I think it's a very incredible limitation for human beings, and we should try to overcome it. But I don't want to make this a discussion about that topic. Maybe I will make a separate video about that, and if people are interested, we can discuss it. But um, by the way, in these slides, my comments and my will be always in blue. I'm going to show them in blue, and these are sentences from the book itself. So I'm going to respect his point of view because that is his point of view, right? He believes, like the majority of human being, and I think it's almost like, how people don't understand Bitcoin. I think people don't understand aging. It's the same thing. It's almost like, I don't know how do you want to call this type of peeling. You know, it's a kind of form of orange peeling, maybe, I don't know, white peeling. I don't know how to call it, but convincing people, look, you don't have to die. You know, maybe we can defeat aging. Maybe we can extend life hundreds of years. We can explore Mars. We can go to other planets, other stars. We can do all kind of cool things. And many people resisted because of religion, because of fear. Like same thing with when new things, right? Bitcoin is a new thing, and many people are scared and they have all different misconceptions. But again, I will kind of stop there because otherwise it became a discussion about this topic, and it's very personal. I understand many people have their own uh, views on this topic, um, but maybe we can do it in a separate video if people are interested. Okay, but he makes sentences like that. It's a feature because people don't even know if it is a feature. Is it a feature or is a neglect? That actually is a scientific question. Is it programmed for a human, for not just human beings, but all different life forms? There are some life forms that are basically mortal. They don't die, um, because we go through different type of transformations, etc. And there are certain life forms that lives like turtles. There are some turtles that live 200 years, 300 years. Why a turtle should live 300 years and me and the loved ones should live only 100? It's like no fear, it looks like, because many different reasons. So I want also to live 300 years. Why not? Can I live at least as a turtle, like as long as a turtle, or a jellyfish or whatever, some of these kind of almost immortal jellyfish. Why not? So we don't know. This is actually a scientific question. Is it programmed, or is it more like some kind of neglect, right? Like where things are getting basically like kind of a form of entropy, where once you reproduce, and that a lot of life is seems to be programmed for that, to basically replicate with genes, right? Life doesn't seem to be caring about a single individual. It cares more about the gene being transmitted from it goes beyond the reproductive age, basically decays, because there is no incentive for biology to keep going, for keeping the organism alive. Um, so we don't know. But many. So this takes this. This is supposed to be something from Bill Gates about how it is the best invention. I don't think so. I think it's stupid. But maybe in the biological field, it is, because then you have new life forms and new generations, and you have evolution. But we are beyond evolution, right? We are beyond evolution. But again, I'm going to make it's so tempting for me to say all the things I want to say about the topic, because human beings are overcoming evolution. Most of what we do is not linked to evolution, right? Evolution, if it was for evolution, we will not do a lot of things that we do, like taking care of people that are on a wheelchair, or that they cannot speak or talk, or that they need help. We will let them die, right? But we don't, and because we are trying to overcome the limitation of evolution. Evolution is not the end of all it. It's there and it's important, and as created us, but why we cannot overcome evolution? Why we have to stick to evolution, right? We have technology, we have science. We can go beyond evolution. Why not, right? But that is what he's trying to say. That is, of course, is my comment. In my culture, in my subculture, right? It's a group, a movement called transhumanism that I am member of. At least in spirit. Actually, even practically. I'm part of some different organizations and so on. And I know guys, in particular in the Bitcoin community, we are not Satan worshippers or bullshit. That is Alex Jones crap, because he's trying to get subscribers and people follow him. Actually, it's a lot of very good people that just believe in science. We think that we can solve problems with science and we can overcome our limitations. And I know that are scary things, but none of us want to, kill everybody and worship Satan or stuff bullshit like that. It's like stupid. It's completely stupid. The globalist, it doesn't have anything to do with that crap. But it's mostly like, okay, science has done so far for humanity, and we have solved so many problems. We, even right now that we can talk on the computer, all these things. Why not also try to solve other problems like, the limitation of our brains? We can maybe enhance ourselves and be more clever. Maybe even mental problems. A lot of depression or many other problems like that, and also extend life, for hundreds of years, so we can enjoy exploring and having relationship with other humans, and maybe now even AIs, and it's like so amazing. The universe so amazing. But let's stick with what he says. So he was there, and he was trying to understand if there was some kind of explanation of why aging happens, right? And notice the word mechanistic theory of aging, because that is again very much. It makes me laugh because when he talks, I can see a physicist talking, and that is very typical of how I think. Like where is the mechanism? What is going on? Like Bitcoin. Why Bitcoin is doing this? What drives Bitcoin to do this? What is the mechanistic theory? What is the causative links, right? What causes what creates aging? So that it was his question, and he was asking a very simple question, and maybe there is some kind of equation, or if there is not an equation, maybe an algorithm, or maybe some graph showing that there is a precise relationship between one quantity and another, right? For example, this scaling of aging with maybe the size of the animal, right? Maybe bigger the animal, longer the life. Maybe is there a graph like that somewhere? And you look for all these, and you couldn't find anything. But I know exactly what he's talking about because I had exactly the same experience. Like I told you, I will ask these physics questions and looking in the neuroscience journals, and there was no answer. Like, why nobody's asking these questions? For it's like supernatural for us as a physicist. Why they don't ask? So silly. And what that creates like a low hanging fruits. This is why, for example, for me, it was easy to discover all these things in Bitcoin because nobody asked physics question, or at least not in a very focused manner, about Bitcoin. And then they became very easy, low hanging fruit where, you can do a lot of progress. You can do a lot of breakthroughs by just looking when nobody else looked. You look at, like Galileo, he was like, you will think, how come in thousands, even not even the planets where he actually had to use the telescope and, not the Greeks could have found out how to use lenses, because it was a question of how to magnify things with a piece of glass. They knew how to use glass very well, but they didn't even know. The ancient Greeks didn't know that if you drop an object, the stones accelerates. It goes faster and faster. Nobody knew for thousands and thousands of years, right? It's so weird. And maybe it's difficult to see the acceleration with your eyes, but it's also once you see it, it's kind of obvious with an object. If you drop an object, particular from a big height, it starts to look like it's going relatively faster and faster. Now, even there, you have to be careful because they reach like what is called the terminal velocity, and that and when the object starts to move in a constant speed. But Galileo made a lot of breakthroughs by simply starting to think in this very methodic fashion and looking for mathematical relationship between things that nobody else did. And so he was like one of the first scientists to create all these incredible breakthroughs. And same thing, like if you come in a field where there are not a lot of type of quantitative questions asked, then you can do a lot of breakthrough. So this is what he's trying to explain. So this is associating that with the lack of interest by the biological community in aging and mortality, like almost is a taboo topic. Maybe there are some people, but it's a relatively small community. This was mostly at the time. I think there is much more progress now. There is more and more people starting to go in this field, but it's still very controversial. There are relatively few funding. Some of the researchers are starting to trying to change the terminology. They want to describe aging like a type of illness, because a lot of illnesses are associated with aging. A lot of things that go wrong, not just in very, very, very old people, but also middle-aged people are associating with the process of aging. So it's very important to study aging. Even if you're not, interested in living forever, it's still very important, because cancer, all these things, most of them are actually, of course, some children can have cancer, but most people have cancer when they're old. That is, statistically, that is true. So, and so you say, okay, maybe I can start to answer this question as a physicist and start to bring the tools and the ideas and the terminology from physics. And maybe I will do some progress in this field, But it's kind of exactly how I went to neuroscience. So I found a lot of, even from a life experience point of view, I found a lot of similarities. Okay. My batteries are also dying on my phone. So I will try to, I'm stopping here. And sorry if we are moving very slowly, but I want also to tell you some of my experiences, because, this is going to make a little bit more different. And I see a lot of analogies, what happened with him. And also in two fields, in my case, in two fields, right? In him also, because he had his first experience with biology, and then he went in the field of sociology, where he brought physics again. Where today I had a questionnaire in my X, right, one of these polls, and I was asking people why they don't, because there is a lot of people that it was, kind of a joke, half of a joke, but also serious. They resist the power law, right? And they don't like it. And one of the reasons is because, according to the poll, people are unpredictable, and they are not, because this entire book explains they are not. They are very much predictable. And guess what? One of the tools to predict what people do is exactly a power law. Our power laws. That is so silly. Come and listen to this video, read the book, because it was like what, almost 40% or something, like a big percentage of the people that don't like the power law is because they think it's unpredictable. You are describing something in a predictable way, and humans are not predictable. They are very, very much so predictable. And this is the other part of the book that will come later, when he actually left biology behind, and then he started to go in the realm of human phenomena, and Bitcoin is a human phenomena. So I almost like parallel life with G.West, where I went to neuroscience, that is a branch of biology first, and then I went to study Bitcoin, that is a human and financial, right, and sociology kind of, right, phenomena. And he did the same. And he found power laws. I found power. He has actually inspired me. I started to study Bitcoin using the power law because I saw a video of him. I knew about power laws in general because I use them in my career, etc. But I was missing the human aspect. I didn't know that, like many people, that actually you could describe human activity using these power laws. And when I saw his lecture, that he has a TED lecture, very beautiful TED lecture, and he was talking about cities, etc. When I say, oh, if it works with city, it should work with Bitcoin. And this when I discovered my first power laws. It was like a direct inspiration for me to find power laws in Bitcoin. So it's really cool, right? Having this personal connection. I would like to meet one time. And by the way, one of my best interviews was with Breedlove. And Breedlove has 4 different interviews with G.West. So at a certain point, I will link them with these videos so you can go and watch them because he did a very good job in talking with G.West. So there are all these interesting connections and links. So it's really, really cool. So I will stop here and see if there are questions, and then we can maybe end. I've always felt Bitcoin was alive when I discovered your work. Yeah, exactly, right? This is what was, and I thank Jeffrey because I was there. I was in Florida with my girlfriend at that time, and we were watching this on TV. We put it on TV, but it was on YouTube. I said, Linda, when you want to listen this beautiful video about how physics applies to everything, and when he started to talk about cities, and he was saying, "Oh, cities are like living beings, and there are the roads are like the circulatory system, and the nervous system is like of a cities, all the communication cables and the fiber optics and the radio communication." I thought, whoa, this is so fantastic. And I had almost this vision that Bitcoin was like that. Before, Saylor actually talks about the Bitcoin being this digital city, right? A city in the digital world. And I had the same vision. I said, let me go and check. And I don't remember if it was the same day or the day was the day after. I started to look for all these on-chain data, and I started to find power laws between addresses and price, price and transaction, price and hash rate. I didn't find the one in time until 2018. This was 2013. So it took me several years to make the next step. But it has been an adventure since then, and so this is why I find a personal connection with all these ideas. They are, to me, they're amazing and beautiful and interesting. Yeah, same thing, right? With so Zen Vision is asking. Okay, so let me go orderly. With Saxon Smith is asking. I'm curious how you came up with the power law slope indicator. How do you come up with an accurate indicator? Well, it's so the slope indicator is again was is the idea of finding some kind of scaling that is independent, because many people criticize, say, oh, you just draw a line through the data, right? First of all, it's not just drawing a line. This in physics we do that all the time. It's mostly to show there is some scaling relationship between the data, because when you plot it in a log-log graph, and the book talks about this a lot, the book is trying to avoid equations, is trying to avoid a lot of math, because when you publish a book like that, I heard somewhere the editors always say every time you introduce, sometimes we are tempted to write even a simple equation, and they say every time you write an equation, you lose like 50% of the possible readers that you could ever have. People get turned off. I don't think so. I'm writing a book. I will have equations. Maybe I will, a good compromise is maybe making like some kind of additional page where people can go there and go deeper and look at the equation, etc. So they don't have to deal with that if I don't want to, or maybe you can even have an appendix or something. But I do want for the reader who wants to spend a little bit time to understand the equations, the simpler one, right? To go and do that. But I didn't find any equations in his book so far, unless I read it several times. If it was there, it will be. But but it does explain the logs and the log charts and things like that. So I wanted to find different ways of showing that Bitcoin has scale invariance property. So one of the things I did, I calculated the like little miniature power laws, right? So instead of looking at the entire change, from the beginning to today, I look at random changes, right? Or even daily changes. So look at the change in time, the change in price, and it should be like a little slope, right? Y versus X, right? The change, what is a slope, right? It's the ratio between the change in Y over the change in X. In this case, it's the change of a scale. So you will have to take the log of the price and the log of the time, right? By the way, when you take the difference of the logs, you're going to get ratios. So sorry, when you take the log of ratios, you get differences, right? So it's like you're basically looking at the change in the logs or the log of the returns. And then what you discover is that it's a random process. So for Bitcoin, it's random. So basically, it follows a power law in average. It is really cool because you have both worlds, right? You have randomness typical of stocks, etc., and you have order because in average, these little miniature slopes, they follow the power law. And then you can calculate the moving average of these slopes, and you see they follow very precise where the peaks are and where the lows are. So you can make an indicator that tells you almost like surgically where the tops of Bitcoin are and where the bottom of Bitcoins are. It's really cool. So it has both theoretical application but also practical application. Okay, and then Zen Vision is asking about Jason Lowery's, I don't know, Lowery's. Sorry if I mispronounce it. But he wrote this book. It's called Soft War, if I remember well. And it's a fantastic book. I think he's a military guy. And he wrote it, I think it was some kind of dissertation, right? Or master thesis or something for his studies as in some military academy. I don't remember if it was a Air Force, maybe. Do you know Zen Vision? Do you remember? Was it? Is it an Air Force or is a Space Force? It's a cool force, right? I like it. Space Force. People make fun of it, but it's cool that we have a Space Force, right? So it's a thesis for Space Force, right? He's an officer in Space Force, and yeah. And I'm sure that at a certain point will be very relevant. But at a certain point, he has actually a power law. It's he finds a power law between how much power a nation or any entity can project. And what is in the graph? I need to go back. But I was really impressed by having a power law in that book. And it's a book about Bitcoin, so it's not a direct relationship with Bitcoin. It's indirect, but the implication is, Bitcoin gives you, it's in that scale there, with it's basically like a weapon, not that you are going to use it against people, but maybe almost like a deterrent, right? But these are the best type of weapon because, like the nuclear weapon, they are not good because if you use it, it takes just one time. If we use it, then we are gone. And I know that a lot of young people believe it is weird. That is another thing that I find so weird. There are all these videos online on how to survive a atomic war. What do you want to survive, and why will you even want to survive? I am all for life, extending life, but I would not want to live in a post-apocalyptic world. It's horrible. Even if you were able to survive it, probably you're not. We have so many atomic bombs that they can destroy humanity many times over. Um, and not just humanity, many other life forms. But yeah, he has this beautiful. I have a book, and it's sitting on my night desk because I look at the diagram, I look at the philosophy of it, and it seems so cool, and I think it's a really cool book. I didn't go through it all. I started it, but it's in my uh, list of things to do to finish the book. But I did find that power law because many people show me, and it's really cool. So it's another Bitcoiner that found a power law that is relevant for Bitcoin. So it's super cool. Um, I've read Alpha Scale. West is a genius, right? It's fantastic, right? And it's for sure he's a very good communicator, science communicator. I wish I had a small percentage of his skills and his ability. So he's an inspiration for me, even in that, because that is one of the things I want to be, like a science communicator. And he's for sure a very good inspiration. He's very eloquent and very inspiring and very. It's amazing. It's beautiful. The book is beautiful. Very easy to read. It's interesting. It brings a lot of examples from real life stories. Because always starts with a little story, right? Um, some interesting historical person and how they started to think about scaling. So I really, really, really recommend everybody to read the book because it's not just about understanding better Bitcoin, because if scaling is essential to Bitcoin, like I'm making this claim, you need to read it if you're a Bitcoiner. It becomes like the new Bitcoin standard. But also it allows you to understand the phenomenon of life and almost everything around us. It's so interesting. Um, and many people don't know. Again, it's one of these things that is so important, and at the same time, like Bitcoin, right? It's so important, and very few people are even aware that such a topic exists. That is scaling idea, right? That you can look at things from a scaling point of view, and then a lot of things starts to make sense. So it's a really interesting book, and it's worthwhile to spend the time. And hopefully, by being together and discussing these things together, we can go through it. For me, it's also motivation. I read it a long time ago. In fact, after I saw the lecture, I immediately go and I bought the book. This was 2013, and now because I'm trying to write my own book on this topic. My book will be similar, but it will be more focused on Bitcoin. Like the relationship of scaling in Bitcoin, why scale is so important in understanding Bitcoin. But of course, I would need to reference a lot this book, and it's an inspiration. Um, and so it's a motivation for me to read it again, to go deeper, because sometimes it takes 2 or 3 times reading a book like this before you get everything. Plus, when you try to teach something, you learn a lot. You learn so much more. And so I'm thankful for you guys that are listening to me, because it gives me an opportunity to learn myself a lot. So we are doing this together. Um, do you have other book recommendation? Yeah, and in fact, if you have a patient, guys, look, we are on this for the long term, right? We want to wait until Bitcoin is at least 1 million, and so that will be 10 years, and maybe even 10 millions, that is 20 years. So I'm planning to do this for the next 10 years, and hopefully maybe there is an aging breakthrough, so my beard start to become, I was actually kind of light brown. It's going to become lighter, etc., whatever. Um, and so if you put up with me, we can go through many different books. If you, and maybe I'm becoming better, less, more of a good communicator with time. But yeah, so another one that I suggest you, it's It's a book by Barabasi, but is about network. Um, so he's also a physicist, and they just gave a Nobel Prize. Um, so he's a famous physicist, and he kind of developed this science of networking, of networks. So he wrote this book that is called Linked. So in fact, that I think once we finish Scale, uh, it was going to take a long time if we go with this very slow pace. But once we finish with this book, we can read together Linked, because it's all about networks and the importance of networks, the significance of networks, and so on. So that is a very good book. Um, yeah, but I'm going to make a list, of interesting books. But these are two of the books that I will read right now because they are very relevant. Life and the impact of AI. He was also a very important inspiration. One of the reasons why I wanted to understand pattern and also using pattern to make predictions, because that is why we study patterns in science. Is this author? So it's a peripheral, but he also talks about technology. Uh, so he wrote this book that the name is Kurzweil, and he just published this book that is called "The Singularity is Nearer." So he had a previous book where he was making prediction. Among them, there was, look, in the mid-20s, we will have AIs that you can talk with, and people were making fun of him. So again, I kind of find some um, similarities with what he's doing because people were making fun of a guy to make predictions. But it's this beautiful book that is called "The Singularity is Nearer." Um, and he's making all this projection of what is going to happen in the next 15, 20 years. Among them, that we will have AIs that are more clever than humans, and then that maybe there is a we should merge with them. That I know, again, people think it's crazy that they have all these. It's it's it challenges, right? What is going to happen in the next 20 years to us as human beings and as living beings? AI. People don't even realize. Hey, Stefan. Stefan, by the way, everybody, Stefan is another astrophysicist, and he kind of rediscovered the power law basically independently. And I love him because, again, like with Jeffrey West, he says something and say, "Oh, my dear physicist, he thinks exactly like he talks like a physicist, he thinks like a physicist." And Stefan is exactly like that. He's like, like, yeah, you're right. It's like listening to somebody of your tribe, right? That is talking and he's saying the right things, that you agree with because he talks your language. And Stefan is like that, and he's contributing to understand the power law. And I love him because he's almost like the opposite in all the scientific things. We are perfectly aligned with slight variations, but in his attitude, like he's very composed, and he explains everything in a very systematic fashion. And I am, this crazy Italian scientist, so we are complementary in that way. So uh, he's in the chat. So thank you, Stefan, to show up. I'm almost done, Stefan. Maybe come on next time. You know what, Stefan? Maybe we can do this together sometime if you like. We can read it together. We can comment it. We can do it. If you are interested, maybe we could do it together. Maybe you can come as a guest once in a while, and discuss one of the chapters with me or whatever. I'm sure that you read the book many times. Uh, but yeah, so these are some of the suggestions. But I will try to make a reading list. Maybe I can post it every time we start a meeting, like other books that you will like to read on kind of related topics. It's so beautiful. All these ideas are beautiful and amazing and worth to be explored. And the fact that Bitcoin brings us together is also beautiful, because we are coming here, from different fields, different fields of life, different interests, different professions. And then, like me, I'm trying to understand economy, that I will never have had any interest if it was not for Bitcoin. I will not want it to understand. If I had to study stocks or gold, I would never have spent my time to study that stuff, even if they pay me a lot of money. Like there are a lot of physicists who go to Wall Street and became quants. But if I had to spend all of my days studying stocks, okay, it's interesting, it's data, maybe there are patterns, but it will not be, I will not find a lot of motivation. Money will be my main drive to do that. But with Bitcoin, it's not. It's about knowledge, because it's such an amazing system, and it means so much more, and there is so much more meaning in it, that it goes beyond just trying to be financially independent. And there is also that aspect. So, it's amazing. So, and, notwithstanding all the things I say, my irritation, etc., I love a community. I love a community because I think we are very special people, and we have very interesting point of views and experiences. And the fact that we kind of self-selected to be interested in these kind of things and be open, to learn new things, new skills, new ideas. It's an amazing. It makes us a very, very unique community. Anyway, so hopefully this has been interesting for you guys. So we are basically page 85. We didn't go very far from page 81, that was the last page we covered. So if you want to read the next few pages, and I will try to do this every Thursday, and maybe Stefan will come. I'm okay with the pace if you guys are okay, because we can go deeper and read. Basically, we are reading the book together, a few pages every time. Okay, thank you so much to be patient and listen to me for all this time. And I will see you next time, next Thursday. Thank you so much, guys. Bye.